Iranian General Qassem Soleimani, who died in a US drone strike in Baghdad on Friday, have been returned to Iran. Tens of thousands of mourners crowded the streets of the city of Ahvaz as the vehicle carrying his body made its way through the streets. Amid the grief, chants of death to America. General Soleimani was the architect of Iran's military activities across the Middle East, and his influence meant that only the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, outranked him. And these are live pictures of those funeral processions. This is the scene currently in Mashhad. The cortege is continuing to make its way across the country before the funeral on Tuesday itself. And the assassination marked a significant escalation between Iran and the United States. Tehran's leadership has threatened severe revenge. President Trump, who authorized the attack, has warned against any retaliation. Lina Sinjab reports from Beirut.
A sea of mourners across Iran. Thousands are out to bid farewell to a man respected by many at home and feared abroad. Major General Qassem Soleimani's body arrived in Iran early on Sunday morning. 3 days of mourning begins here in Ahvaz before moving to Tehran on Monday, and then the burial in his hometown in Kerman. This is a moment of mobilizing loyalty among Shia communities in the region. Iran vowed to take revenge for the loss of its top commander, a man who shaped the country's presence and influence in the region by force and blood. Iran's response could come at a time and place of its choosing to hit American interests in the region or beyond. Some of its proxy militias in Iraq started reacting. 2 rockets hit American bases in the heavily fortified Green Zone in Baghdad, where anti-ISIS coalition is based. No casualties reported, but that's a sign of warning for the nearly 6,000 American troops in Iraq. Perhaps it's time to leave. Instead, the US is planning to bolster its defenses in the region, sending 3,000 more troops. President Donald Trump warned in a tweet of harsh reaction to any attack on Americans or US assets. He says the US has targeted 52 Iranian sites to strike if any escalation. The world is calling on self-restraint. But the loss is big for Tehran, and the consequences could be severe for the US and adds tensions to an already complex region. Lina Sinjab, BBC News, Beirut.
And anger at Friday prayers in the Iranian capital for the assassination of a man who led the charge against ISIL in Iraq and Syria, and whose death seems likely to lead to more conflict.
God willing, it is now time to clear and cleanse the region of these devils. It is now time to show more resistance to the Americans and show our resistance with action, to tell those Yankees to get out of here, get lost.
In the early hours of Friday morning, shortly after arriving at Baghdad International Airport, U.S. missiles killed Soleimani and his close ally, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy head of the Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, Hashd al-Shabi. Other members of the group were also killed in the attack. A drone strike hit their convoy as they left the airport.
The cruelest people on earth assassinated the honorable commander who courageously fought for years against the evils and bandits of the world. Soleimani's martyrdom will make Iran more decisive to resist America's expansionism and to defend our Islamic values. With no doubt, Iran and other freedom-seeking countries in the region will take his revenge.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted a video showing Iraqis celebrating the attack, while Soleimani enjoyed widespread support for leading the charge to displace ISIL from Iraqi strongholds. Some Iraqis blame Iran for instability and interference in their country, and Soleimani directly for the deaths of more than 500 Iraqis in violent anti-government protests, which began in October. Feared by his enemies, inside Iran, Soleimani has for years been one of the most popular national figures in the country. The international face of Iranian resistance to American pressure, he remained largely untouched by the waning popularity in recent years of the country's government over economic issues.
The top Iranian general has been killed in an airstrike while leaving the Baghdad airport. The Pentagon confirmed the U.S. military carried out the attack. Qassem Soleimani was one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East and had been the top military man in Iran for more than 20 years. This attack comes after Iranian-backed groups breached the U.S. embassy in Baghdad just 2 days ago. We now turn to ABC's Kira Phillips, who's with President Trump in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, the president was cryptic. He responded with only a picture, tweeting out the image of the American flag. My White House sources were able to confirm that not only did the strike happen, but it was ordered by President Trump. The Pentagon announcing that the strike did indeed kill the powerful commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qassem Soleimani, as well as the head of an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia. And it was ordered by President Trump. Now, here in the U.S., Republicans are calling this a success, saying Trump made a brave and correct call. But the president is also facing questions from his critics on Capitol Hill, asking if the United States carried out the assassination without authorization from Congress, potentially bringing this country to the brink of an all-out war.
Well, when ISIS was taking over towns in Iraq, Soleimani would often be seen in Iraq, traveling back and forth between Iran and Iraq to help lead the fight, these Iranian-backed militias against ISIS. He was a very strong but very mysterious presence in Iraq. He was not high profile by any means, but people certainly knew he was there and certainly knew what he was doing in trying to defeat ISIS. But I will also say that his presence was felt throughout the war there because he was responsible for the deaths of many Americans, and I heard soldiers and generals and everyone talk about that and what the Iranians had done and the Iranian weapons that were present in Iraq and targeting American troops.
So clearly this is a victory tonight then for the Trump administration, but I would imagine that Iran will have a response, yes?
I think it's almost certain Iran will have some sort of response, even given what we've heard from them this evening in tweets, and that the United States in some way will pay for this. I think the important thing here to look at in any kind of Iranian response is whether they take credit for it. Remember with the attacks earlier this year on the Saudi oil fields and the drone attacks, they talked about the drone, but they did not talk about the Saudi oil fields. They did not take responsibility for those attacks. In fact, the foreign minister of Iran told me in person when I was in Tehran that some of those must have been photoshopped, that they weren't responsible for those things. So I think if Iran has some sort of response to the killing of Soleimani and they take credit for it, they are looking for a larger conflict. If they don't, I think they want to tamp this down.
Thank you so much.
The U.S. calling the strike a success. For the Iranians, almost surely a call for retaliation. Iranian television announcing his death, saying Soleimani had been martyred after years of struggle for Islam. The Department of Defense confirming the attack, saying it was done, quote, at the direction of the president, adding this strike was aimed at deterring future Iranian attack plans. The attack came after continuing tension between the U.S. and Iran. In 2018, President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal brokered by President Obama.
This was a horrible, one-sided deal.
Just days ago on New Year's Eve,
do I want to? No. I want to have peace. I like peace. And Iran should want peace more than anybody. So I don't see that happening.
In April, the U.S. State Department made the unprecedented step of labeling the Iranian National Guard a terrorist organization.
This historic step will deprive the world's leading state sponsor of terror the financial means to spread misery and death around the world.
By early May, the U.S. aircraft carrier had been deployed to the region. Then, a shocking escalation, a series of attacks on international oil tankers in the region's busy shipping channels.
Smoke billowed hundreds of feet high from one of the crippled oil tankers.
The tit-for-tat all leading up to a June 2019 attack on a U.S. drone. The Pentagon claims it was flying in international airspace, but Iran maintains the drone was in their territory. The Pentagon readies an airstrike, only to see a stunning reverse in course around 7 p.m. The U.S. military ready to launch warplanes and warships at Iranian targets, until one final meeting between the president and members of his national security team. where Trump made a dramatic reversal against the advice sources say of former National Security Advisor John Bolton and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. But he later told NBC News he changed his mind because the planned strikes were not proportionate to Iran's downing of an unmanned U.S. drone.
I thought about it for a second, and I said, you know what? They shot down an unmanned drone, and here we are sitting with 150 dead people. That would have taken place probably within a half an hour after I said go ahead.
The president denying reports that planes were in the air and ships were in positions before he called off that strike.